Why the poll? There we go. Perfect. Welcome, everyone. It's Monday, February 10th, 2025, and time for our regularly scheduled city council meeting. Clerk, certify the meeting notice, please.
This meeting has been noticed in accordance with Idaho Code 74-204.
Clerk, call the roll.
Councilmember Jacobs?
Here.
Councilmember Jorgensen? Here. Councilmember Page?
Here.
Councilmember Rasmussen?
Here.
Thank you. If you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item D is changes to the agenda. Councilmember Jacobs.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to pull off item 3 on the consent agenda.
Okay, let's just move it down to special business 3. Does that work?
Thank you, it does.
Okay. Okay, the matter before us now is the amended consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
I move to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Second.
got a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Motion carries. We'll move now to special business, CVH Hearts Across the Valley presentation. Welcome. Nice to see you.
Share that screen really quick.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, for having me. My name is Mariel, and I work for CBH Homes. I've been there since April, and I'm a Scrum Master. I don't know if anyone heard of that title before. Essentially a project manager, and I get the privilege of working on a lot of special projects. Pretty much anything that doesn't have anything to do with our home, like day-to-day home building, I get to oversee. So I'm here to talk to you about Hearts Across the Valley, which is one of our projects today. And I want to give you a little bit of background. And this was a video, but I'll just kind of explain while I have Rhonda Conger on here. She's here in spirit. So Hearts Across the Valley was really inspired by a trip that Rhonda Conger took to Kansas City with her family. She's a self-proclaimed hockey mom. And when we went to one of the facilities to watch hockey, they saw this really beautiful heart. You can kind of see it in the background of where she's at. And there's just people gathered and hanging out and, you know, taking pictures with it. She's like, oh, that's beautiful. That's just kind of strange, but really cool. And so as she was kind of going around town and they were, you know, on their vacation, she started seeing more and more of these hearts in front of other, you know, city buildings and parks and things. And so she kept seeing people gathered around these hearts, and all of them, you know, decorated in beautiful different ways. And so she's like, I need to learn more about this. So she did, and she found out that it's called Parade of Hearts in Kansas City. Anybody ever been to Kansas City before in the last 5 or so years? So maybe you've actually seen some of these hearts before. Well, this project was actually started out of COVID. You know, we were all in quarantine, and they wanted to really find a really cool, unique way to bring people out into the community when we all started being able to get out again. And so Parade of Hearts was born. They've done this for a couple of years now, and she just thought it was just a really cool idea, and we wanted to do something like this in the Treasure Valley. So we're doing our own version. It's our own passion project. I will say it's on a much smaller scale. Kansas City, they do about 100 to 150 hearts every time that they do their cycle of the project. So we're going to be doing 30. So that's a little bit of the inspiration. I wanted to also show, because it's so hard to explain how beautiful and the potential for all of these hearts. And what they do is they purchase, you know, 100 of these 50 fiberglass hearts. They're almost 5 foot by 5 foot tall. And what they do is they come in, they're all blank, and they put out a call to artists, and the artists decorate them, and then they put them out into different locations throughout the city, which is really neat. So I just have a few examples. Again, over all the years they've done this, it's about 350 hearts total that they have. But I just want to be able to show you really what it could be. Each location is very unique and different. And so here's a couple pictures. Oh, there's the Chiefs. Sorry, guys. But, I just wanted to show you kind of too, how they look out in the wild, after they're decorated and they put them in their spots. So we're wanting to do something like this. And so again, our project is called Hearts Across the Valley. We're doing 30 hearts and our goal is to hit 13 cities. And really it's, again, our passion project. We are donating our hearts to our cities and many of the locations. Our goal is to really bring the communities together to be out to explore parks, businesses. So we've gone to cities and we also have gone to private businesses as well, to get what we're calling heart partners, for our project. So through town and all the cities that we're going to, and you guys are not, unfamiliar with this. I have some pictures of the beautiful benches you guys have through Garden City. So the concept is pretty similar to, things that other cities have done before with the benches and, bringing out. It's just a really great way, again, to attract people to come out, just to really enjoy some art throughout the communities, highlight artists. We're going to be able to, put some money towards the artists that they're decorating these hearts. We're going to be able to promote them. We're going to have an interactive app. So not only on our website will we'll promote the hearts, but also an interactive app where we'll be able to profile the artists that are selected for each location and also give them a platform to be able to show their work too. So right now, we've got about 15 different locations that are on board. This is just kind of a map to show you how they're spread out so far. But I wanted to kind of go down here and show you exactly who so far are heart partners. So we've just got on the Boys and Girls Club Meridian. The city of Meridian is helping us out. College of Western Idaho. One at the Ford Idaho Center. Expo Idaho, just right, over here across the street. Middleton Mountain Home, and it's been a really great opportunity and speaking with the smaller cities like Jerome and Mountain Home, because they don't always have the resources or the budgets to be able to bring a larger scale public piece of art. So it's been really fun to hear their excitement around it and this opportunity that we're able to help infuse some more art in their communities, which has been really great. But these are just some of the locations, and the count is growing. We just got on board Talea Winery too, just right over here, which is really awesome. And I wanted to share a little bit about the hearts because the cities always want to know what, the specs of the heart for safety reasons and what that's going to look like. So all of our hearts are, again, almost 5 foot by 5 foot tall and wide. And then it's made out of fiberglass. They have a steel rod right down the middle and it's very secure. We have partnered with the Parade of Hearts. We're using the same manufacturer that is all of their hearts. And so we feel really confident they're safe and they're sturdy. They're meant to weather, all seasons. They are, meant to be out throughout the couple of years that they'll be there. And they can use sandbags to weigh it down. And if you guys want something that's a little bit more sturdy or heavier, that would make you feel better, we absolutely can look at doing something like that too. And then the other question we always get is what is our, is our logo on there? Is our branding on there? Ultimately, it's super small. Sure, this is a project that CVH is doing, but on the back of the where it's gonna say, so glad you're here, underneath there's gonna be an acrylic little plaque. It's about 3.5, inches tall by 11 inches wide, and it will have the city logo on it or whatever location is the sponsor, and then CVH logo on it. Do you have any questions?
Okay, questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Love it. Very cool. So are they meant to be permanent? They don't weigh a lot, right? So someone can move them. Does Kansas City move them around or where they stay put? What's
No,
the
they stay
thought
put.
there?
For Kansas City, they stay put for a year.
Okay.
We're looking at hoping to do 2 years. If we
Okay.
wanted to make it a little bit more permanent, because we are ideally we want these hearts to be in place forever. We want them to love them so much that this will just continue to grow. So we can make them as permanent as you want, or it's heavy enough to where it is very, very different.
Yeah, right. All right. So every 2 years. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
thank you for your presentation. What's your ask today of us?
Our ask is just a consideration of moving this project forward, and hopefully you guys will say yes, and we'll want to partner together and find a location for a heart for the city of Garden City.
They're not asking for money.
No, they're not asking for money.
Yeah, I think that's,
Yeah, the heart and the artist,
when the council says what you're asking.
Yeah.
That's called for how much?
Yeah.
Our second city council.
Yeah, well, we want to help you. Yeah,
Mr.
yes,
So thank you very much for this presentation and for considering Garden City. As you likely know, we love and endorse artists. So how is the art selected?
So that will be a combination of whatever committee you guys want to put together for your city. And then we would get all of the submissions together and then we would present them to you and you guys will decide which artist and which design you would like to do.
And continuing, is that also the case of the final location?
Yes.
yes, this has been, we didn't have a formal presentation, but this has been presented to the Parks Committee. You know, that would be our starting place here, to see what they thought about it. And of course, the green belt is considered part of our parks infrastructure. So of course, there are a lot of locations. The purpose that I wanted the presentation tonight was to get us thinking about this, and if the council gives me a head nod, then I'll get more active with coming up with a specific process. I think the ability to have artists get involved in this would be kind of fun. With our unique bench program that we had a few years ago, that's resulted in some one-of-a-kind benches along the green belt. I think we'd want to coordinate with Ada County, the fairgrounds, if they're going to have a location on the fairgrounds, that we may want something, you know, the Pamela J. Beaumont Park or somewhere else along the system. So, but I got exposed to this at the Treasure Valley Partners meeting in Meridian. It was a couple of months ago now. So, and the wheels of government don't turn real fast sometimes, so that's why you're just here tonight. But we didn't want to put you at the end of a 4-hour meeting or something. So, have you got any more questions? I think I'm getting the feeling that the council will be interested in taking you up on this opportunity.
Fair.
Yep, of course.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Thank you.
so make sure your contact info is with Lisa.
Yep.
You got it? Okay. And we'll be in touch.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Jordan. Nice to see you. Jordan Zaggart is gonna do our audit presentation for us this evening. And
So I'm Jordan Swigart from Swigart John Associates. I'm here to go over your audit. Not as exciting as Hearts around the city with artists, but we have to do it every year, I guess.
well, we like audits. If they
If we
turn
pass.
out the way this one did, I think we like them quite a bit. But anyway,
So I'm gonna start on page 4 of the pamphlet I handed out. And this is our opinion on your financial statement. Did you want me to put it up here or? All right.
no, we've all got a copy.
Okay, perfect. What this says is that we looked at your financial statements, we looked at supporting document, invoices, bank statements, tied everything out to your accounting software. And in our opinion, everything was materially correct. Meaning throughout the years, you're getting reports, you can rely on those. Those are accurately showing what's going on. From there, I'm gonna jump to page 9. I'm just gonna kind of hit a few highlights over the audit. So if you have questions, please stop me as we're going through. I'm more than happy to answer questions. I'm here on page 9. This is your balance sheet of your governmental funds of the general fund, your development service, and your library debt service fund. The general fund, you ended the year with just under $7 million. The development service ended the year with just under $1 million in it. Below that, the prepaid items of 187,000. Most of that's insurance, that the insurance year is a little different than your year. So as you paid for those last year, they'll get expensed this year we're in now. On the receivables, property tax receivable, 157, that's back taxes that are just still owed to you. They're still owed to the county. Accounts receivable, you have about 32,000 and the general fund and 42,000. Those are just receivables at the end of the year sitting there. Due from other governments, $480,000. Most of that sales tax from the state of Idaho that comes in October, but it's really for that your last fiscal quarter. And franchise fees are just, again, the franchise fees you got in October that were for that last quarter there. And then a little bit of grants receivable and $62,000 of interest receivable. The liability side, I'm told you had about $450 of accounts payable. That's just timing of invoices there. Accrued payroll was $272,000. That's just September hours that were paid out in October. And then the other big one there, the 1.9 million of unearned revenue. That's the ARPA funds that have not yet been spent. So they're sitting there until they are spent. Any questions on that? From there, I'll jump to page 11. This is the income statement for those funds. So you see the third line from the bottom there, change in fund balance. The general fund increased its reserve by about $293,000 for the year. The development service fund used about $106,000 of its reserve for the year. And then the debt service fund every year just gets enough money to pay the debt. And so it's always at a zero there. Any questions on that? All right. From there, I'll jump to page 13. This is the balance sheet for your business type funds, your water, sewer, and sanitation funds. I won't go over everything on here, but cash, the water fund ended the year with just about $7 million of cash. That internal balance there of $25,000. The sanitation fund had a negative cash balance of $25,000. So that's where it's offsetting that. Again, a little bit of prepaid items. Accounts receivable at 1.1 million. That's just September's billings that would be received in October. And then due from other governments, 33,000 is a little bit of grant revenue again that was earned just got after the year end. The liability side, again, that internal balance of 25,000, that's the negative cash balance in the sanitation fund. Accounts payable of 1.3 million, and then a little bit of accrued payroll, and then the everything else we'll look at a little bit later. But overall, the water sewer fund ended with more assets than they had, and like we saw, like it was last year, the sanitation has a negative cash balance in there. There I'll go to page 14. This is the income statement for those. So the water sewer fund increased its net position by about $1.4 million for the year. The sanitation did decrease its reserve by about $16,000 for the year. So it did end the year with a negative net position in that fund. I'll turn to page 15. This is what actually happened with cash in those two funds.
Let me back you up a
Yes.
minute. On the sanitation fund, council, Lisa, will you just briefly let the council know how you manage that fund? Because if we're finishing in the negative for very long, then what happens?
Correct, Mr. Mayor, thank you. As members of the council, we are looking, we try to run the sanitation fund as close to break even as possible. So I'm actually looking at it right now for us being 3 months in. The Republic Services makes their adjustments in January for where our fiscal year starts in October. So we're kind of taking a look at that. I'm going to go back to page 14 for just a minute. So we did actually make up some ground in fiscal year 24. It started with a net position of about negative 16,000. We made up about 7,800. So we're working towards bringing that back to a positive, but we didn't want to hit with large increases. So we're just incrementally bringing that back up.
Just, okay.
No, thank you.
Yeah, just not a lot of questions when we're adding to the balances, but if we see a negative, right?
Correct.
Not that it's a big one, but anyway. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Go ahead.
So yeah, page 15, this shows the change in cash. So water sewer fund cash increased by 1.9 million. And like Lisa said, the sanitation fund cash actually did go up $2,000. So it was positive cash for the year. Those are the basic financial statements. Any questions on those before we jump into the footnotes? Here, I'm gonna skip quite a bit because I want to keep everyone awake. Footnote 1 is just goes over your accounting policies. Very interesting stuff if you're bored later. I'm gonna jump to page 25. Footnote 2, this just goes over where cash was at the end of the year and where it was sitting. So really your cash is in two places. You have cash in the bank and then you have cash at the state local government investment pool. So that external investment pool, that's the total of all those. You had about $14.5 million sitting at the state investment pool. And the remaining almost $400,000 was sitting in the bank at the end of the year. Footnote 3, we saw the due from other governments before. Footnote 3 just explains that in detail there. From there, I'm going to skip forward again to page 31. I'm just going to hit a couple footnotes here that show some of the more long-term liabilities that the city has. Footnote 6, compensated absences. This is vacation time that your staff has earned but had not taken at the end of the year. So you ended the year with about $289,000 worth of vacation time that if everyone had left would have had to been paid out. That's actually a decrease from the start of the year, which is always a good sign. That means staff is actually taking their vacation time, which was what we'd like to see. So for a city your size with where your payroll is not a huge number, just something to be aware of there. From there, I'm going to jump forward to page 33. So the city had one long-term liability, one debt at the end of the year. You have your general obligation bond for the library. You paid $60,000. You have $65,000 left to pay on that, and that will be paid off in fiscal 25. So nothing big there. Right? So. And then the only other thing, footnote 13, the city does have some credit cards that are used. You have about $100,000 limit on those. At the end of the year, there was about $16,000 used on it. That was paid off subsequently. We just like to make sure that the council is aware that there are credit cards that are used out there. There, I'm going to actually jump to page 34, fund balance. So your general fund had about a $5.3 million fund balance, which can sound like a lot of money. Footnote 16 here just shows where some of those funds are already allocated to. So you have $1.5 million that's set aside to fund operations, a rainy day fund, more or less. If property taxes didn't come in, you'd have the funds to cover payroll. You have $300,000 that you've set aside for the FEMA mitigation study. And then 187 is non-spendable because it's prepaid. So I just like you to be aware that, yeah, the fund balance looks big, but some of that's already set aside for future things. From there, I'll jump to page 38. These next two reports we'll look at here. These just show what happened versus what was budgeted happened for the year in the general fund and the development service. So in the general fund, you'd budgeted to bring in 9.5 million. You brought in about 9.3 or about $280,000 less than you'd budgeted. You'd budgeted to spend 11.1 million. You spent 10.3, about $826,000 less than was budgeted for the year. And then you transferred in money from the water sewer fund. So overall, in your budget, you'd plan to use 250,000 of your reserve, and instead you increased it by almost 300,000. And then turn to page 39. This is the same for development service. Here, you'd budgeted to bring in just over $1 million. You brought in about $92,000 less than was budgeted for the year. You'd budgeted to spend 1.1 million. You ended up spending just over $1 million, or about $46,000 less. So you'd budgeted to use 60,000 of your reserve. You ended up using about 106,000 of your reserve, and you still have 800,000 left. So still a good amount there. And so pretty close to where he was budgeted. Any questions on those?
I think on the swing, explain how the FEMA money we're holding impacts that. You know, we've got, we're holding 300,000. We paid, how much did we pay down on FEMA this year? About
So the FEMA money,
Sorry, Lisa, I
No,
didn't think
you're
about this ahead of time. I've given you a heads up.
I actually have it right here. So we pre-fund FEMA. We send them essentially a deposit, a lump sum of money, and then they send us an expense report quarterly. So I offset that prepaid every quarter with what we've actually spent. So the last money, we have sent the Corps $670,000. And at the end of fiscal year 24, we hadn't spent about 175 of it. So that hits our balance sheet as that prepaid. And what we're saying is we can't spend that money. It hasn't hit our revenue and expenses yet until we actually get the expense report. So, and Jordan might be able to help, but it's kind of sitting in limbo, I would say. It doesn't affect our fund balance till we spend it. So we set it aside on the report saying, we know we're gonna spend another 300,000 out of the fund balance. We just haven't funded it yet.
This can play with your head a little bit if you're looking at this and you're going, gee, these are six-figure numbers now. What am I missing here? Well, it's function of time. Yeah.
It definitely is a
Yeah.
function of time and
Yeah.
a function of prepaying for something.
Yeah.
Normally you get a bill, you pay it, and it hits your expense account right away. It hits your income statement. But in this instance, we send them the cash and then slowly draw that down as an expense.
Right. So, and there'll be more of that likely to come. So that's why we've got to set aside in our fund balance to deal with that. Okay, sorry.
No, I appreciate that, Mayor.
Yeah.
From there, I'll jump to page 43. So in the state of Idaho, and all government entities, in addition to just looking at the financial statements, we also look at controls over financial reporting and compliance with reporting. Really there, what we're looking at is more than one set of eyes looking at bank statements. Are they looking and approving invoices? Are time cards being signed? Are the banks being reconciled timely? And as we looked and tested all that, we saw that that was being done. We saw bank statements were being reconciled on a timely basis. Everything that we looked at, we saw that more than one person was looking at it. So we did not have any findings there. We did not see any compliance issues either. So overall, good, clean audit report. I know that's a lot of numbers and information, but any questions for me?
Any questions you can think of at the moment?
Thank you.
If you develop questions after spending a little more time with this, let Lisa know, or Jordan, I'm sure would be available to answer a question if you had a question for the auditor.
Yep, my number's on top of both letterheads. I
Yeah.
always offer, feel free to call.
Yeah.
I've had very few take up on that, but I'm always willing to go over it.
Ready.
Yeah.
So
Notice who I didn't suggest you call.
the mayor's sitting ready to. Then if that's all, you'll just want to make a motion to accept the audit report and we're good for another year.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I move to accept the audit report for year ending September 30, 2024 as submitted.
A motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, clerk call the roll.
Councilmember Jacobs?
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yes.
Councilmember Page?
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen?
Yes.
Thank you, Jordan. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Next item, item F3 is, I moved that to the wrong place because I've got to move it to an action item spot. So
G3?
G3.
Okay.
So we'll take that up in a minute, council, with your indulgence. So we'll move now to G1, Resolution 1198-25. We're selling a couple of our motorcycles to the city of Emmett because we're getting a couple of new ones. And this is the agreement to make that happen. It's in the packet. Do you have questions on it? Don't see any questions. What's the pleasure of the council?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I move to approve resolution 1198 25.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, the clerk call roll.
Councilmember Jorgensen.
Yes.
Councilmember Page.
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen.
Yes.
Councilmember Jacobs.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Motion carries. Item G2. This is a resolution, it's in your packet. This is the new memorandum for the State Street Transit Corridor. And the major change between the previous version was that high occupancy travel lanes have been removed from the plan. Is that pretty much it, Jenna? That's what I thought. Jenna's available to fill in any blanks if you have. If you can see the blank look on the mayor's face, that's all he remembers.
Mayor, members of the council, thank you. Mayor, you're exactly correct. The high occupancy vehicle lanes are in the 2011, it's called the T-TOP, the State Street Transit and Traffic Operations Plans. It's actually precluded by state statute. And so those have been replaced with multi-use lanes. So any vehicles could utilize those lanes. There are a couple of other just very minor changes that are in the addendum that would be adopted into the updated MOU, including correct references to the current communities in motion plan. That's kind of like Compass's, I'll call it comprehensive plan for the valley, date updates. And then there's some other minor amendments within the T-TOP, the 2011 T-TOP, including the buses would be in lane instead of pulling out. And the bike lanes, instead of being alongside the cars, would be on the other side of the green buffer. And so they would have some level of protection. And with that, I stand for questions.
Any questions? No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure to council.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I move to approve resolution 1199 25, the new MOU. I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, the clerk call the roll.
Councilmember Page.
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen.
Yes.
Councilmember Jacobs.
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That motion carries. Now we'll move to item G3. This is extension SUB FY 2022-0008 Chandler's Place. Councilmember Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So council members, I pulled this off the agenda just because, you know, in the last year, we updated our extension code. And we really didn't have, in my opinion, a way to manage the projects that were approved prior to that extension. And so what I was proposing and talking with the mayor and with staff is having on the decision document that this is the last year of that current extension, and in the following extension would fall under the new code. So it's a way to migrate all of our applications onto the new code. And so on any extensions that were, I use the term grandfather, or were not grandfather, but were prior to the code, I won't use the word, that were prior to the code, that we move them onto the new code by having that statement in the decision document, that this is last year, you will fall under the new code on your next extension request.
So that was the idea, and this is a project that is 3 years old now. And assuming the council extends it again, that will be 4 years. And if it comes up again next year, that would be evaluated on the basis of our current code. And just to confirm, an extension request doesn't create necessarily a specific obligation on the city, except to review the code for compliance. And I think Councilmember Jacobs is thinking if we don't take some action, we could have extensions that go on for inevitably.
I think the plan, Mr. Mayor, is that on any of those applications that we now make it just kind of standard language on any of these extensions that come up, that they will migrate on to the new code. So they could still be then on the consent agenda, but they'll have a statement that you will fall under the new code on your next extension.
So hopefully that won't be necessary because these projects will get underway.
That would be ideal.
So are there any questions about that?
Mr.
Any
Mayor.
Comments? Yes.
That's a question for Mr. Wadums. Mr. Wadums, do you have any concerns with the proposed idea from Councilmember Jacobs?
Mayor, Council President, I just heard about this like 5 minutes before we walked into this meeting, so I can't give you definitive legal advice on that right now. I can tell you that there is a case called Dry Creek Partners LLC versus Ada County Commissioners, where it appears that case says that the version of the local code that applies at the time of an extension request is the version of the code at the time of the extension request and not the approval. I would, of course, want to verify that, but that looks like that's what this case says. I think I think you could put that on if the council's considering approving the extension, you could put it on there. And if the applicant doesn't like it, they could ask for reconsideration within 14 days, I suppose.
Thank you. No further questions, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Any other comments?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I frankly, I like the idea and the logic behind it. I think it would put in writing the concern and the cutover. And I like that concept.
Mr. Mayor, can I add just one?
Certainly.
One legal thought.
Certainly.
Of course, I just want to make sure it's clear. This is on the old version of code. We just amended our code to say, indicate what the criteria is for extensions and who reviews that and how many you get. I think that, whatever the new code says is what we apply going forward. And if the council wants that caveat, then we should put it right in the code. I would suggest that would be the cleanest way to do it. But I think that hopefully these issues have been resolved with the recent code amendment that we went through. So there should only be a couple more of these coming through. Hopefully.
Any other questions, staff, comments?
Just a comment. I think it's a brilliant idea. I think it's creative and effective. Just wanted to make sure that Mr. Wadums didn't have concerns. He issues spots better than I do many times. So
I think we could go forward with that today. And we're be particularly concerned.
Councilmember Jacobs, if you'd like to make a motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we add on the decision documents for extensions of applications that were prior to our current code, that the statement be added to the decision document that their next extension will be subject to our new Garden City extension code that we recently passed.
Jenna,
Did I articulate that right?
is that the way you want it? Is that good enough to articulate it for you? Okay,
I'll second that.
they've got a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion?
Mr. Mayor, does that include approving the extension or is this a separate action? Are we
I think the
approving-
intent was to approve the extension with the added language as an additional condition.
Right.
Thank you.
So just for the minutes, Mayor, a point of order, just for the motion, is it because there's the standard at the time was just cause? So the council's finding that there's just cause to grant the extension. So that's.
Yes,
I'll be able to say that too.
yes. And the current request for extension is approved due to just cause. But they will be subject to the new code on their next extension request. And this goes for all applicants that fall in this category.
And I misspoke. It's good cause, not just cause.
Good cause. Yes.
Thank you.
Good cause. Thank you, Charles.
Okay, any more discussion on the motion? Hearing none, clerk call the roll.
Councilmember Rasmussen,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacobs,
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Yes.
Councilmember Page.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries. Next, let's see, we have no unfinished business, new business. We have a legal briefing regarding the local land use planning act. Think everybody received the memo from Mr. Wadhams. There's been a Supreme Court decision that impacts the local land use planning act, and Mr. Wadhams is going to help us navigate that. This is an information item tonight. We're not asking to change anything tonight. So Mr. Wadhams, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I have a short memorandum on this topic, and that starts on page, I have it right here. 136, yes, thank you, Council President. 136 of your packet. It's just a 2-pager, and it's some issues that I saw when I was issue spotting. And there was a recent Idaho Supreme Court case that came out just a couple of weeks ago, I think January 22nd. There's also another case that came out about a year ago, or in 2023, and that's that one's called Northwest Neighborhood Association. The case that came out just a couple of weeks ago, that is regarding conditional use permits and that process. And then the other one is regarding planned unit developments and that process. And what both cases say is that if land use decisions that are quasi judicial, there needs to be a reasoned statement in writing, and it needs to explain why. So if the council thinks that it's not good for health and safety, you need to say why, right? And everybody needs to be put on notice why. So it is consistent with health and safety because blah, 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 or it's not consistent with health and safety because blah, blah, blah. But if you don't put the blah, blah, blah in, you're going to get reversed by the court. So you need the blah, blah, blah. I think one of the takeaways that from this opinion was that the Supreme Court justices, and it was authored by our Chief Justice, and it was everybody agreed, all 5 justices agreed, there was no dissenting opinions. Chief Justice wrote it. It sounds to me like the bigger your record is, the longer your reasoned statement needs to be, because the longer the record is, there's going to be more disputed facts. You have to resolve all the disputed facts. You have to resolve all the issues that are raised. So I think the takeaway is if you have 100,000 page record, you probably need more than a 1.5 page decision document. And so in this memo, I go through some things that I've just been thinking through, and I know some other city attorneys are similarly thinking through these things. That case is a head scratcher on a couple different levels that I don't need to get into right now. But if you look at my memo, the first bullet is, when we are coming up with code amendments and we are reviewing our code, we should be thinking like judges. We shouldn't be thinking like planners. We shouldn't be thinking like politicians. We shouldn't, with all respect to everybody, be thinking like a judge, not like a city council member, not like a planner. And they're going to look at these words and they're going to apply the definitions that they have through case law and precedent. And so so put yourself in the shoes of a judge, and I think that's a good first step. My second point here is I think some smaller towns, they just don't have staff to write a detailed reasoned statement. I mean, they maybe have 1 or 2 people in their planning department. They may be new, they may be experienced, who knows, but everybody has staffing issues. And so my idea is make the applicant write the reasoned statement, or at least let them draft, they have attorneys, they have engineers, they have professionals, let them do it. I mean, I don't know why it's our staff's responsibility to come up with reasons to either approve or decline a project. I would think that would be up to the applicant. And I have, during my tenure here on complicated land use issues, I have invited both sides to come up with what they think the decision should be. So then you're looking at what the applicant thinks is right, and then you're looking at what the opposition thinks is right, and then you come up with a reasonable solution. But I think we could shift some of the burden on people other than our staff, because it is a burden. I would say I'm recommending that maybe we shift it to people other than our employees.
Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
And Mr. Wadhams, sorry for the interruption.
Yes.
Do you want questions as they come, or do you want to finish discussing the memo for discussion?
I think we could take it one of two ways. I want to do it whichever way the council president wants to do it. If you want to cover, if you want to cover one point and then have a discussion, I think this is a non-action item. I think this could be treated as kind of like a work session. So whatever your preference is, council president.
Well, thank you, Mr. Williams. I would like to just attack this as, attacks the wrong word. Field questions as we get into each bullet point. First off, compliments, and I sent you a message about this, but just publicly, this is one of the most clear memos I've read, and it frightens me at the same time. So in question 2, there's this talk of burden shifting and relieving this language, and we've all sat up here and tried on the fly to come up with these well-reasoned statements, knowing that, especially for some of the bigger projects that we've seen that are controversial, knowing that they're going to be reviewed later for potential weaknesses. And so, at least I've tried to be really careful with my words. And I think, and most of us probably have on those bigger projects. And so I want to know, Mr. Wadhams, what you think might be beneficial and what might be in the negative column if we decide to burden shift.
Well, I think, Mayor, Council President, council members, I think the benefit is that it frees up our staff to be doing their job. I mean, that this is kind of their job, but they have plenty of other responsibilities. So I think it hopefully would free up some staff time downstairs. And the negative, they're still going to have to review the proposal. The staff's still going to have to review what the applicant put through. They'll still have to review if there's any opposition. Maybe there will be a disagreement. I can see where there's a disagreement between what the applicant thinks is right and the plan reviewer thinks is right. So I think there's some pitfalls to it along those lines. So we would have to, mayor and council would have to, in terms of a policy decision, think that through and give staff the appropriate sideboards.
And thank you for that. I can imagine almost every situation, if we decide to undertake this burden shifting model, we would have quite a bit of self-interested statements, reasoned statements being presented to us that we would need to kind of weigh for their validity, to see if the language is exaggerated or really the language we would want to use. And I see that our directors step to the pulpit. Do you want to say something there?
Mayor, Council President, should you find it appropriate, and thank you. One thing that I would like to point out on the burden shifting is that the city does see a wide array of applicants. We have some very sophisticated applicants, and then we have other applicants that this may be their first time doing this. They may not. Conditional use is a really good example where they're just trying to start their business. They're not doing it with design professionals and attorneys, and that may be something where perhaps there's a hybrid as this works through the process and the city determines how to address what occurred in this case in context of the city's code. But I did want to bring that up as something to not lose sight of as well.
And thank you. And I'd love to hear from the other council members, but I'm just tip my hand a little bit. I'm more than a little uncomfortable with the idea of being in front of a court defending a reasoned statement that we didn't write or say.
Mr. Mayor,
Mhm.
President of the Council, so one of my questions, Mr. Wadhams, this might be directed to you, is have the courts dealt with any cases in which they ultimately say the city is responsible for the reasoned statements, period? I assume that's the law.
Well, Mayor, Councilmember Jorgensen, I think when you approve it, it becomes yours. I mean, you own it at that point in time. So, you know, so I could see all kinds of scenarios where the council likes part of the proposed reason statement, doesn't like other parts. It just, or maybe doesn't like any of it at all, but I think it gives opportunity to see where everybody else's heads are at. I generally, sometimes I do this just for a strategic reason, because if somebody offers wording to me and I accept that wording, they can't come back and complain about the wording because it's their wording. So, I mean, you know, don't complain now because you're the one that drafted the thing. So there's that strategic advantage. But you would have to certainly be comfortable with the wording, and you would definitely own it if you approved it. I think it's somewhat similar to sometimes staff comes up with proposed wording for you and then you adopt it or you don't adopt it. And this would be something I think similar to that. I have not seen any case that straight up says this is valid or not valid, but I can tell you some of the bigger firms in town, they're advising their small town clients to do this. So this is not unique to Garden City. This is an idea that's being floated around all around the state.
Mr. Wadums, Mayor, I do have another question. So have there been any cases in which the courts say the city has unduly burdened applicants?
No, not Idaho. My search did Idaho. The answer is no, Council.
Mr. Councilmember Page, I like the idea also, and I think to Mr. Waddle's point, we can either approve or deny the language of the reason statement as submitted. I would want to see a standardized reason statement, right? So similar to our application is you have to check box A, B, C, D of your reason statement, you know, fill it out in the way we want, so we don't get 10 different formats, 10 different reasons, you know, one person writes a wordy novel versus someone who's very clear and concise, you know, kind of to this Thornborough point about experience. I think if we do that, I think we come up with a template of what we want it to look like, what we want it to say, and everybody fills that out the exact same document. We don't have a different version of a reason statement every time we look at this. So we get used to reading them and seeing them, and they're the same for everybody. So I like the idea, but I think we ought to put some rails around about how we want to see it, kind of like what we see now with our reason statements. They're very clean.
Mayor, Councilmember Jacobs, I think you could fashion it a lot of different ways. Ms. Thornborough is correct. Maybe you don't need this process for a simple application. It's just a staff review. But if you have an application for 500 townhomes or something, so you could build in, you could bake in the thresholds for these things. And I think probably there should be some threshold, because right on a simple first time extension, so you'd be balancing or weighing those type of things. But I think it's plausible and possible, and I think it would hold up in court. And we just have to fashion it accordingly.
I think one thing to just keep in mind, when an applicant is making an application, that application should comply with our code. In other words, they should be checking the boxes, as somebody said. And in our current code, and Jenna, you start correcting me when I get this wrong. You know, you can't adversely affect health and safety in your application. You've got to be compatible with the neighborhood in the context of the comp plan or some other document. That's part of one of the boxes you've got to check. And so forth. And so part of this exercise, it seems to me, would be an explanation of those check boxes that's developed by the applicant. I don't want to use the 500 unit complex with Wendy sitting in the room here, but some other example that might impact police response times, uh,
Public statements from the fire marshal that are of concern.
yeah, that kind of stuff. And so part of the application process would be to basically be, how do you comply with? And you create the obligation on the applicant to address that kind of a narrative in a narrative fashion. And one, things we're sensitive to are service loading for our various functions we do. We require ability to serve pieces in our application. So as you said, the fire department says, yeah, we can serve this project. It's 4 stories and we have access to a ladder truck, so we can serve this project. Or it's 4 stories and we don't have access to a ladder truck, we can't cover it. So whatever it is, I think part of that can get built into some very minor tweaks in our application that requires how are you complying with, and let them put the burden on them to do that. And on a simple project where we've got a 6-unit infill, Jenna can advise on how best to attack that with the applicant. That might be a 15-minute meeting because there's not much there. You don't have enough impact to affect the police department or the fire department and we've got enough water and sewer and all those other things. So that's a thought on a big project where you've got outside consultants. It could basically be the same kind of a scenario. And our staff and our council is experienced enough, and our planning commission's experienced enough to know the trigger questions. So what about traffic? What about fill in the blank? And because the questions, we get the same questions all the time. And how does it comply with the comp plan? Whatever our application says. And I think that's a way to at least get their perspective on how they're complying with our code as part of the application submittal. And my suggestion to our development services staff is, if there's not if there's a piece of that that's not included in the application, we reject the application until it is included. And then you still have to review it. There's still staff loading. And that can come in its raw form to the city council. It can come to the city council in its raw form with comments from our staff. And it can carry through if a project is approved and it is appealed, either from planning and zoning to the city council or from the city council on. That appellate document includes a reasoned statement on where the error occurred, or so that might be a way to pass that initial burden on, and we still have the review time. But so that's just something we could kick around too. I'd like, I'm seeing a few head nods. I'd like to review that with Jenna because I didn't think of that till just now. And so I'm seeing if the color has gone out of her face or not. But if that's something we can take a look at between Charlie and Jenna and me, we sure run that up the flagpole to see if that works. Plus, we're going to know here in the not too distant future how other cities, generally they want this to happen, but what's the framework? What are the nuts and bolts? Yeah.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
I understand and I agree to a certain extent, kind of shifting this. I believe applicants should have skin in the game, and I also agree that what you're saying is you know, it should be included in the basis of their application. Um, I want to make sure that, regardless, that we continue to be a city that's easy to work with and that is easy to bring business and development in. That is a big consideration for me. I love hearing, as you know, I love hearing developers come in and say, we love working with Garden City. They're easy to work with. I don't want it to be a gate so high or so burdensome that even a small, to Jenna's example, as somebody that's small, who's never done this before,
Sure.
is overwhelmed with
Sure.
a pile of paperwork that they're faced with an application. So that would be the one of the considerations that I want to make sure we don't lose sight of as we begin this, considering managing through this process. That, and that, you know, ultimately this council owns the approval, and so it's got to be clean. And so my preference is that by the time it gets to the council, that we're not seeing a bunch of handwritten notes and comments, and, you know, it needs to have a certain level of cleanliness so that we can get through it efficiently from our position here.
Well, it can actually be an advantage to the applicant because there are certain components that we deal with and we hear testimony on in virtually every significant project. I mean, it's the same thing. It's compatibility, health, safety, traffic. I mean, am I wrong?
No.
Okay, so and we hear arguments in the testimony and application materials that deal with that, with traffic studies or comp plan declarations. But we can identify those, and the more that the applicant does, or the appellant that does, that's saying, no, this is bad, and this is why. And Charlie, we're not even letting him hardly get started here, and we're getting bogged down. But it's very interesting because his opening comment was, you got to think of it like a judge. And what's a judge look at? The judge looks at the code. And what was your decision in relation to the code? And does it comport with the code or doesn't it? And there's going to be the distinction between pointing out what complies with the code and what an opinion might be on the project, so I had a great time reading Charlie's memo, and I read the rest of the other one. But it's pretty interesting. So if it's all right for the council, we'll noodle this number 2 a little bit, and we'll need to spend some time with Jenna on this too, because we're reading this wrong as far as what we want the applicant to do. I'm just thinking of some pretty big projects that we've had in the past that
Mr. Mayor, real briefly, excuse me. I agree with you that I think this could be a benefit to an applicant. I think it gives them an opportunity. I mean, they're coming into our city as salespeople, basically trying to get an application through our hurdles. And I do think that coupled with that, we own the reason statement once it leaves our desk here. So I do see that future meetings, we will be, we always review the reason statements in detail, but I feel like we might give those more attention, especially when an applicant has written them, and I don't have a problem with that. at all. I think
We've got the format, those little boxes that we fill
Yep.
out on compliance or not. I mean, the staff does those and I think staff, in my opinion, should have an opinion on on compliance. And I've talked to Jenna about maybe asking the staff to convey their opinion as opposed to saying, well, if you want to approve it, this is the thing. And if you want to deny it, here's some criteria, and trying to play a devil's advocate one way or the other to give the council a choice. So I broached the topic of, well, let's get a staff opinion on the compliance piece. And if that requires if in staff's opinion, that explanation on compliance needs to be articulated, or there's a question about compliance, then I'll let the applicant make that argument. And you either agree with it or don't, I guess. So it's something we can explore. And if I come back at a future meeting with my head down, you'll know why Jenna didn't like it. So, because at the end of the day, our staff is going to be our first contact that has to navigate this. But it's interesting, and no doubt in this opinion, your reason statement, if it looks like an opinion, I guess it's kind of an opinion, but I meant if it doesn't have a sound basis in your code, then you got a problem. Charlie, go on.
Okay, Mayor Council, happy to. One other point on that section number 2 or number 2 is fees. I just want to mention this briefly. I have said several times over the years that maybe we need to take a hard look at our fees. And I know we want it to be inviting for everybody to come build here and stuff, but I think we're undercharging fees. I haven't looked at the fee schedule lately, but a lot of times our contract city engineer is reviewing things and we're not recouping that expense when we could. Sometimes staff is reviewing, at staff time, I think is in the fees. I was just talking to Mr. Chu about this today, where Joe Canning's reviewing something and we're not getting reimbursed for it. We should be getting reimbursed. We should be getting reimbursed for attorney review time. I spend 10 to 20 hours on reviewing something. The city should get that reimbursed from the applicant. So I think I'm just recommending maybe we take another look at our fee schedule and see if there's some other things we can charge that we're currently not. So on the third bullet here, just think like a judge. The fourth bullet is a lot of these terms that are floated around have legal significance. They're terms of art in court. That abuse of discretion has a specific legal definition. So all these terms, these things have controlling precedent in terms of what they mean, arbitrary, capricious, and so we should just adopt the court's definitions of those things, and then we can't get sideways with the court if we're using their own definitions. Number 5, the point on number 5 is be careful about what I'd call subjective terms. You can have subjective terms as long as they're not decision criteria, but what does minimize adverse impact mean? It depends on who you ask what minimize adverse impact means. And so I would suggest we don't even use that word as or that term as a decision criteria. So again, I've said often, and I continue to say that we want simple terms that are simple for everybody to understand and are objective, and we have clear definitions and so on and so forth. One of the main things though on 6, there was a lot of discussion in that case from the Supreme Court in January a couple of weeks ago about the standard of review. And I think that this is squarely in the council's lap in terms of how do you want to review it? Do you want to review it this is like an appeal, or do you want to do over? And I think you can go do it either way. And I'm not even asking for an answer right now, but the council directs it, staff will make it happen. So and I will give you a recommendation. I know a lot of times you're looking for recommendations, and I will have a recommendation for you based on the size of our city and all our nuances and everything like that. But right now, you can go either way. So if there's any preference, I would take a note of that and go from there. But yeah, what kind of review? If you want a de novo review, like say somebody appeals an approval of a cup and you're gonna say, okay, it's a de novo review, then everybody's gonna get to testify again. It's gonna lengthen your meetings, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but you're gonna have testimony a second time, you're gonna have a public hearing a second time. And so it's just a lengthier process. Not to say it's a bad process, it's just a lengthier process. So those are all considerations that I think as we go through this process of our code cleanup, we should, I'd recommend that we look at. Number 7 talks about aspirational language. Whenever I see the word aspirational, it makes me nervous. You know, it makes me twitch a little bit. I hope we're not making decisions on what's aspirational and what's not aspirational. And I think that's about it. Just know your audience. I mean, I always try to say, know who you're talking to, know your audience. On these things, you're talking to the court. I mean, ultimately, when somebody appeals or files for a judicial review, we need to pass the hurdle of the judiciary. And then some other random thoughts while I have the floor, and I appreciate it, is a lot of these things you don't have to have it all. And you don't have to have a planning and zoning commission. You don't have to offer conditional use permits. They could just be permitted or not permitted. You don't have to offer variances. You don't have to offer waivers. Those are all discretionary on the council. The easiest thing to do, and I'm not advocating for it, I'm not saying it's the best thing to do, but the easiest thing to do is get rid of all that stuff. It's either permitted or it's not. Council's going to decide everything. That'd be the easiest thing to do. So I stand for questions.
Mr. Ray?
Yes.
Mr. Wadums, do you have a sense, and you may not, but do you have a sense of how many LUPA cases magistrates see compared to their full docket?
Well, I would say, Councilmember Jorgensen, first of all, it goes to the district court, not a magistrate judge. So magistrate judges would rarely see these type of issues. It'd go in front of the district court. This opinion, the Supreme Court opinion that just came out, it was initially decided by Judge Cynthia Wallace, excuse me, is her name. And she ruled that everything was fine with the approval of the homeless shelter. And then the Supreme Court said, no, not everything is not fine with the approval of the homeless shelter. So it goes to a district court, not a magistrate court. And those are not published. District court opinions are not published. So you kind of have to search for them. So I couldn't tell you how many actually come through. I can tell you for Garden City, we've only had one in 20 years or whatever. And that's the one that came out in 2022 with Judge Medema. So I don't think they happen a lot, but they do happen. And I'd be happy to research that for you.
I think that your experience says enough.
I think that the bigger you are in terms of size of your city, the more challenges there's going to be just because of volume of the more applications are coming through. I don't think these issues are coming up a lot in smaller towns.
Thank you.
Mr. Wadums,
Yes, sir.
I know you said you were gonna offer an opinion and give an analysis under item number 6. Throughout my time working with the city, this has been one of the least understood things in my opinion. I haven't understood it to the level that I would like to, and I feel that others probably didn't understand that either. When you're making your recommendation to us on item number 6, would you be willing to do a column of pros and cons?
Yes,
sir. For example, de novo, it's nice to hear all the evidence, right? We would all say that. We want to hear the evidence. We want to see what the Planning and Zoning Commission saw. But I think a real cost of that is staff time and community fatigue, public fatigue with, here we are again back at City Hall for several hours to say the same thing we said to design review, that we said to planning and zoning, that we said to, and I think that wears people down, so I'm sure you'll do a better job of this than me, but But I would like to see kind of a black and white. These are some of the pros of de novo. These are some of the pros of an error-based approach.
Well, Mayor, Council President, I do have an intern in the room from the law school, Zachary Stevens. He will help me come up with that column of pros and cons.
I appreciate that.
We have struggled with that long, I don't know how many times, and one other thing that I think I'm interested in is what kinds of things require two public hearings in the first place. So we need a public hearing for everything at planning and zoning. And I'm going to visit with Jen about that. Some things we do, some things, you know, as you read through this case, the council has some options on the authority that you grant through planning commission. You know, some things by statute have to come to the city council, subdivisions, annexations, things that require an ordinance. Conditional use permits, those can be decided at the council or at the planning and zoning level in most instances. So it's just kind of opened up gee, we've done it this way since 1949, and now we've got a case that says, well, maybe you better think about how you're doing it.
I would say, Mr. Mayor, I've been impressed, you as the holder of the gavel, when we do get appeals that are non-de novo, it's, I think, many times hard for even the applicant to understand you can't bring new material in here, right? Point to the error, correct the error, talk about the error, but you know, this new memo that you want us to read, that's not on the record. And you know, and now we've been liberal in allowing that because we want to be nice people and we want to be easy to work with. And no matter how much you explain it to people, people just don't understand the concept that if it wasn't brought up initially, then it's not on the record and it can't be reopened. You know, I think it's difficult for someone running a meeting to balance that line of this is a strict non-de novo hearing and balance that with, you know, we're here to serve the public. We're elected. We're here to listen to the public's concerns. And, you know, when we're strict about that, the messaging can sometimes be off.
Yeah.
Because people just don't understand the standard of review.
Sure.
Well, Mayor and Council, if I could just say one more thing, you'll see in my memo, it's almost done. I have basically 3 takeaways from that case, that Supreme Court case. Number 1, you need a reason statement, a sufficient reason statement, or you're going to lose. 2, you need to follow whatever your code says. If you don't like your municipal code, then you change the code, but you have to follow your own code or you're going to lose. And then 3, everybody's on notice. You keep doing this, you're eventually going to have to pay attorney fees. Because they said basically in the attorney fee section is you're all on notice. We don't want to keep having to review these things. So I think the risk of attorney fees is real. And those are my 3 takeaways.
It's great reading. If you didn't have time to get through this, it's I found it. I'm not usually a masochist, but I really kind of enjoyed seeing the other side of this, you know, and you know, where the stumbling blocks can be. Because I agree with Council Member George. What's your name? Jorgensen. That you know, we want to be kind to our applicants. We want the city to grow. We want to be pro-business. We operate in a regulatory environment that has a lot of constraints on us. And the Local Use Planning Act is one of those, you know, and the fees, just as a teaser, we haven't looked at our development services fees for how many years, Jenna?
We haven't noticed for the next, a few years.
Yeah, I don't remember. Now, that's not a significant criteria at my age right now, but it's been a long time.
Well,
So,
and Mr. Mayor, there's the
Yeah.
development services, like when the city engineer reviews things for development services, that maybe is in the fee schedule, but I don't think when he reviews things for public works, I don't think public works has a fee schedule for. the
They
city.
do, the Public Works does have a fee schedule.
yeah, we I don't want this to sound like we're mercenary to those that are listening online, or in the audience, but, you know, we owe it to our residents to ensure that our operations here are stable and that we can provide the services that they expect. And cost recovery is part of that. And we've had I don't have to give the inflation speech or the continued complexity of the environment that we operate in, which has been brought up again tonight. You know, the handshake days are gone, and now we've got all these, we got to think like judges. Way to go, Charlie.
Sorry.
So,
Fair bed.
no, I'm teasing, but at any rate, Jenna, what have you got to say?
Mayor, I'm just here for any more questions, I guess, since I was sitting back there away from a microphone.
So, and this is a question for Charlie and Jenna. Do you feel like we're getting some kind of a body language feedback from the council on that can help us with our next discussion we have? I think I do, you know, and we get a pro and con on the de novo, non-de novo issue. And we'll find out if we're having hearings we don't need to have, and maybe we still want them, but maybe if we don't want public hearing fatigue, we decide where those hearings are going to be and deal with that in a more concise manner for those that are interested in a topic. We'll look at, I do want to spend some time with Jenna on, from her perspective, what's the best way to deal with this reasoned decision piece? Because I'm hesitant for us to make that decision until she's got a lot of input on that. Because some of it's already done, just filling out the application. And the things that make me the most nervous are when we have to make decisions that Charlie brought up abuse of discretion, but there is discretion that's not an abuse. So, you know, so we've got to think about how we deal with those things. Arbitrary is in the side of the beholder a lot of the time. And I mean, the Supreme Court used that in this case and said the decision was arbitrary and capricious. And those terms make me nervous. So we've talked many times about the subjective pieces You know, does it meet the setbacks? You know, that's not a real hard one to figure out. It does or it doesn't. But is it compatible with the vision in the comp plan, which is this case points out, doesn't mean a specific component of the comp plan, but does it meet the intent, the flavor of what you're trying to achieve through a comp plan? And then it also points out very specifically, the comp plan isn't the law, your zoning code's the law. And so you gotta navigate from a layman's perspective. I'm getting two messages out of this thing. I gotta comply with the zoning code. The zoning code may have things in it in a particular zone that you could argue allow something that's maybe not compatible with the surrounding area, but it's in the zoning code and it's allowed. So there's discretion, there's subjective pieces to this. And so anyway, it's a great read. Okay, we beat this to death for tonight. Anything else? Okay, that concludes the business on our council meeting for this evening. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adjourn the meeting.
Got a motion to adjourn?
Second.
And a second, all in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. We stand adjourned. Thank you.